Over the years, we have covered a lot of Brexit news, and most of it has come from very specific industry magazines. I mean, we've covered The Grocer, which is the magazine responsible for a lot of news about the food industry and supply chain. You may never have heard of it. You may have never even heard of The Grocer before we've talked about some of its articles that it's put out about the problems that many small businesses, especially food related industries, are facing because of Brexit. And today, it is almost exactly the same case, except it's not in the food industry. We are looking at construction. And construction, especially with its materials, are vitally important to the UK. If we are to really, I generally mean this, if we are to really think about trying to solve our housing crisis, then of course we have to build more houses. Now, that's not the ultimate solution. It's really, really complicated. That involves planning laws, certainly tackling landlords, increasing sort of the protection for renters. Yes, hey, the and this will probably shock a lot of people, but it will also not surprise a lot of people. The average time of a renter spends in a rented property is about 2 years. 2 years. That's how long the average renter spends renting out their UK property. Europe, however, you know what the average time is in Europe? 10 years. 10 years. The difference is wide, purely because in Europe they have a lot more powers given to the renter, not to the landlord in this case. And remember, we've got a government who has for years been promising that they are going to get rid of no fault evictions. Have they done that? That question should have surprised none of you. But today we are talking about construction materials, because construction materials, of course, if you need to build something or anything, well, then you need the materials in order to be able to do it. And these are pretty heavy materials. And this will mean that, especially for supply chains, you have to rely on heavy goods materials and heavy good transporting to be able to transport these things. So this is pretty significant. And especially with the change because of Brexit, we'll hear about in a moment, the war in Ukraine, the sanctions on Russia, and of course, uh, the pandemic as well caused a lot of different things. In fact, I have a friend recently built their house not that too long ago, and he is thankful that he built it when he did, because the price of materials now would have rendered him completely unable to be able to build his house if he had not done it, or at least started building it then, because the price of materials has skyrocketed. So if you're in construction, you know about this problem already. And of course, this is having an even bigger knock-on effect. So why are prices so high? That's the first thing we're going to get into. And then, of course, can we really do anything about solving this problem? Ultimately, yes, we can. But of course, that's going to mean rejoining the European Union. But of course, before we go on into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a rotation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, even if you do, just click the like and share button. Like I say, it all helps out. So, as always, thank you very much to everyone who does help. And of course, on with this. So we go today delving into construction management. The title of Most UK construction imports still come from the EU post Brexit. Now, remember, the big claim by the Brexiteers was that we don't need Europe anymore. I mean, just look at all the imports. Look, we only get like 40%. I think it was what, 45, 46% of our imports come from Europe. So we don't need Europe anymore. But as we said back then, and have continuously said, that was an absolute lie. because they were using the that cunning mathematical um, proposition of averages. Because if you take all the industries and start to average that out, well, then the UK does look like that most of its trade does not come from Europe. However, as we always said, when you start to break that down and you look at different industries, then all of a sudden you start to see why all these different industries are having so much problems post Brexit. So we'll get on into this because this is well worth going over. So, Brexit, COVID-19, and the conflict in Ukraine have disrupted supply chains and led to a resurgence in global inflation rates not seen in more than 40 years. And I would also say the UK highest inflation rate it has ever seen for years as well. It's not just globally. And of course, to fight inflation rates internationally are now at levels not seen since before the 2007 financial crash. In the face of this disruption, there might have been a drive to build supply chain resilience, potentially by turning to domestic production. In the UK, however, there is a limit to what we can produce. This is completely true, especially when it comes to construction. We rely on imports of many raw materials, and our overall consumption outstrips our production capability. So you have to, as you can see here, you have to have at least some level of importing because we just simply cannot produce the required materials in order to, you know, build because it completely outstrips our production capacity. So, what do you do? Well, because remember, construction materials are very heavy. Now, oh my God, water's wet. But that in logistics matters. The weight of your load matters a lot. Because if you've got a very heavy load, shockingly enough, that means you have to be able to have bigger vehicles, stronger vehicles, and able to sort of pull and move this capacity. Takes obviously time to unload, reload these vehicles. And in many cases, many of these vehicles, if you've often seen these types of HGV vehicles, have their own loader on the back of the lorry. So these are very, very specialized HGV goods and HGV vehicles indeed. So it adds to the cost of the logistics. But of course, Brexiteers, being experts in trade, never really thought about that, did they? But back to it. Government data backs this up, showing that the UK construction sector is increasingly not reducing its spending on imported goods. Following a dip during the pandemic, the total of the UK's construction imports rose significantly from 2021 to 2022 by 26% and 14% respectively, according to the Department for Business and Trade. While the Office for National Statistic data shows that construction output grew over the period, it is not at a slower rate than prices of imports. The spike in import value is due to the combination of globally higher inflation, disruption in supply chains, and geopolitical tension that have wrecked exchange rates, making imports more expensive. This position has slightly improved with the recovering exchange rate of the sterling against the US dollar in 2023. However, construction remains highly exposed to direct impacts of global shocks, whether they are caused by policy, in the case of Liz Truss's ill-fated budget. I'm glad they're blaming Liz Truss there, or the wider trends, such as the sanctions on trade with Russia. So, what are you to do? What are you to do if you are a construction? Well, this is what you do. You can't reshore, or in this case, reshore your production. because the UK simply just does not have uh, the capacity for these places, and even then, it will take a lot of uh, planning and to build these places. We don't have certainly the timber as many other countries do. Again, prime component. We used to have a lot of brickworks. That's not the case anymore. Like I say, my own hometown, Barnsley, was famous for two things: coal, brickworks, and glass. Um, and all those three no longer exist. Although technically glass does. We've still got a very, very big glass plant in Ardar here in Barnsley. So I suppose we kept one of the three. But the truth is, we just don't have enough production capacity, and to be able to rebuild that capacity would require a lot of investment. And you'd think, given the government's insistence on reinvestment into the north, that hasn't happened. In fact, this is highly says it all. Stat of the month: 18%, the total percentage of the UK's total goods that were imported to the southeast, making it the largest import region, and the smallest goods were imported to the northeast of 2.6. So once again, just goes to show you the amount of economic activity that the government really needs to shift and needs to really think about industrial strategy. And of course, they haven't. And continually, the levelling up campaign that was promised by the Conservatives fell flat on its face. And remember, there were a lot of people in 2019 that not only voted Boris Johnson for Brexit because they believed his promise to level up. And that promise has not been fulfilled. And more than, trust me, the Northerners who voted for Johnson last time are not going to forgive that broken promise. And also, there's the infamous clip of Rishi Sunak saying we're going to take money away from the poor areas and give it to the richer areas. That is going to play on repeat. So, what do you do? So, despite these pressures, the fact remains that the UK does not have an immediate option of reshoring production to limit exposure to volatile global supply chains. While we are seeing greater is nearshoring, the practice of outsourcing manufacturing to nearby regions which are closer to national borders. In this case, this means the countries of the European Union. The expectation might have been that post-Brexit, the UK's reliance on EU goods would decline, given the potential for strained relationships, the new regulation, and the focus on strengthening ties with non-EU markets. However, it's basically just explained global Britain. That never happened. Why? We'll jump straight to it because I think this just sums it up. The fact that you have had all these stuffs, all this import stuff, it is still highly reliant on getting all its materials from the EU. And as we said at the beginning, the lie of the Brexiteers was that, oh, we don't need the EU anymore. Look, we only import about 46% of our produce from EU markets. Not when you break it down. Here you can see the continued reliance on EU markets is especially apparent for construction, where materials have accounted for 56% of total EU trade. 2022. I mean, that's it. That's it right there. It's we need the EU. We need that trade. And yet you have a government that was insistent, especially in 2016, that we're gonna vote. We're gonna remain in the single market. We're gonna remain in the customs union. Pretty much nothing's gonna change. And then the hardcore free market fundamentalists pushed as hard as they could to get the hardest possible Brexit. They still want an even harder Brexit, because the belief by many of these Brexiteers is we just have not Brexited enough. Meanwhile, there are some more of the soft Brexiteers in the Conservative Party actually realizing, we we we've gone a bit too far. And then, of course, you have at least Labour on the right path of saying, well, we're going to rebuild some of these vital relationships. We're going to make sure that we do these individual trade deals. And as we've said before, there will come a point where you see Keir Starmer go, okay, this is Brexit. We have fixed it. This is as best as it is ever going to be. Are you sure you want to continue with this? All the polling, all the data says that if there were to another referendum were to happen, the British public would vote back in. And if you are in construction or any of those industries that rely on imports of European goods, you're going to absolutely love, once again, being in the single market. Because there are many, many people who grew up in all these various different industries and have only ever really known what it's like to be in the single market. And for the past, 3 years, they've experienced what it's like to be outside it. And every single industry, every single business is saying the same thing. Get rid of this red tape, because it wasn't there before. We want it gone. And you only get rid of that red tape if you join the single market and customs union. That's the situation we constantly hear from businesses time and time again on this channel. And it's the exact same that we've heard from the construction industry, that they want those barriers, the red tape gone. So, it's funny. No matter how far we get from, quote, get Brexit done, the less change we see from businesses wanting back into the EU. And ultimately, I think that's what you'll see, a massive split in the Conservative Party once again happen. I said it a couple of weeks ago. Maybe we will see the Conservative Party at one day become very pro-EU. It's not beyond the realms of possibility once they realize the effective damage that these crazy hard right-wingers have done to their party. You've already got a couple of people like Tobias Ellwood being currently probably one of the lone voices in the Conservative Party saying that. But according to him, he says that there are others who are saying that. They're just not saying it publicly. But in the upcoming Conservative civil war that is about to break out, maybe one might see more of that. So I can only wish them well in the wars to come. But oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, it's going to be interesting. And if we want to help, get our economy up and running again, building new projects, building new buildings, be they business building, houses, etc. Well, you need those materials. So would not surprise me if one of the very first things that Labour actually did under a Labour government was something to do with construction materials. Would not surprise me if that was the very first thing that Labour did and focused on. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.